Hi, I'm John Smith. Welcome to Kingdom Real.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me again today.
My pleasure.
All right, so we are going to talk about a little bit more of your time at New Life.
Okay.
So there must have been a lot of ups and downs and in between,
There were.
over the 23 years that you were there. So tell me about one of your best moments there.
Oh, there are so many, but one that pops into my mind is the Long Island Billy Graham Crusade. Happened in September of 1990, and spent a couple years on the team planning, getting them here and everything. We had a whole week-long crusade in the Nassau Coliseum, where the Islanders played hockey and all that stuff happened. And we had a week long of Billy Graham there. It was just amazing. So many people came to Christ. In fact, your brother, Matt, that's where he gave his life to Christ, at the Billy Graham Crusade. So that was huge. A lot of people in the church and so on. I was in charge of the ministers committee, getting as many pastors and churches there as possible. And the last night, Sunday night, there was over 16,000 people there, and I was given the privilege of being on the platform with Billy Graham and Cliff Barrows and, forgot the guy, George Beverly Shea, the singer, and I had the honor of giving the closing prayer that night. And that was just a really amazing, wonderful experience, and God was so at work. That's one of my all-time highlights.
I remember it well. I mean, it was a long time ago, but
Yep.
I do remember
Absolutely.
that.
That's 30-some years ago.
Yeah.
So.
Do you have any crazy moments there?
I did. So that was in September, and your mom was pregnant with our third child, and I had made myself some promises that I was going to be home more, spend more time with this third child, and things were just going to be so much better. And you were born on Thanksgiving Day, so Mommy missed her turkey dinner that day. Matt, born in the summer in July. And then Andrew, I think he was actually due on your birthday, if I remember right.
I was devastated.
And you didn't want to share your birthday with anybody. It was so funny. And so God answered your request. And your youngest brother was also born on Thanksgiving Day. But here's the crazy part. He was actually born between services on Thanksgiving. So I guess I was just a little crazy. One Thanksgiving service on Thanksgiving Day wasn't enough because some people would travel. So I thought, well, if we do it on Wednesday night, then the people that travel Thursday morning, they can come to church. The other people go. So we did Wednesday night Thanksgiving service and Thursday morning. And so the Wednesday night service was probably like at 7 o'clock. The morning service was at 10 o'clock. So after I got home with the Wednesday night service, about midnight, Mommy says, my water broke. We need to go to the hospital. I'm going, okay. So away we go to the hospital. Andrew was born, I think, about 8 o'clock in the morning, and just enough time for me to hold him, spend time with him, like that. And then I went home, changed my clothes, went and preached at the 10 o'clock Thursday morning Thanksgiving service, came back, got you guys, brought you to the hospital to see your brother. So he's actually born between services on Thanksgiving, and I'd been up all night, and I'm going, well, this is a great start to spending more time with my son and having a more regular schedule. And yeah, that didn't exactly all work out, but that's kind of a funny story, I think.
God always has a sense of humor.
He
about
does.
That stuff.
He does, for sure.
Absolutely. So let's transition. Tell me about one of the worst.
Well, we're in a series of all these things. The best, the craziest, now the worst happens about 3 weeks later. So I got my third little baby, second son, and a couple weeks before Christmas, during the week, I think it was a Wednesday, I stopped home to have a quick lunch with your mom. And during that brief lunch, I got a phone call from a friend. And the subject matter message that she delivered to me on the phone is the worst I've ever received.
Tell me about that.
She informed me that a member of our church had just been found murdered in her bedroom. And they don't prepare you for phone calls like that in seminary, nor could they, or anything else. I didn't finish eating my lunch. I immediately got in the car and drove to the house where it happened. And something that I've seen on TV many times, all of a sudden I saw in real life, and it had a very different impact. It was the yellow tape that the police will do to cordon off an area, and it was around the house and around these trees and this whole thing, and there were a bunch of cars around, there were people standing there, and then I remember my friend walking from on the inside of the tape, went under the tape, came up to me and he says, "Come with me." My friend had been in the past a deacon at the church, but his job was he was a police homicide detective. And so he brought me into the neighbor's house, next door neighbor's house, which they had set up as the police command center for this murder investigation. And it was just surreal. There were detectives everywhere, and all this was going on, and you know, I don't remember all of the details, but it was just surreal. Like this really had happened. This was real. And the phone call wasn't a prank; it was true. And they were trying to locate this woman's husband, and he was out of town. And so they were doing what police do on that, trying to locate that. But they had 2 children that needed to be notified. And they were concerned that the news media was jumping all over the story pretty quick. And they didn't want the 2 children to hear that what happened to their mom on the news. And so one of the kids was at a school locally, some distance from the house. The other one was in college, further away. And so I was the one that had to call the older daughter that was away at college, and I had to be the one that told her that her mom had been found murdered. And that was probably the most difficult phone call I've ever had to make. And then with a little bit younger child at school, I drove up there and found where she was. I think she was, I don't know, in one of the rooms. And then I had to tell her that her mom had been found murdered, and she just collapsed on the floor, crying, screaming, couldn't believe it. And when she got up, I hugged her, and what do you say? I mean, there are no words at that point. And so then she got in my vehicle, and I drove back. I didn't want her to bring it back to her house, and so I called friends who were also members of the church, knew this family very well, and so the younger child I brought to this house, and then the older one as well, and they had kind of a little apartment where they could stay, and but yeah, it was that was really hard, and that's the side of ministry that's you just don't know what to do.
Nobody could prepare you for that.
No,
Like you said, they don't teach that.
they can't. I mean, how do you prepare somebody for that?
You can't.
And who would have ever thought that would happen? I mean, that happens to other people in other places. That doesn't happen.
Or in movies and
Or in
TV
movies
shows
or something. You know, it's like when that becomes reality. Yeah, it's. Yeah, I don't remember all the feelings and emotions, but I remember just feeling like not knowing what to do, and kind of following the lead of, what the police were saying and what they were doing, and trying to be helpful. So.
Were you pretty involved in the investigation then? I mean, it sounds like you were involved in the initial.
I was there the initial night, and there was another guy who had been one of the elders in the church, and he was also on the homicide team, and he was the crime scene photographer.
Of the woman that went to the church.
I mean, that was his job, and then that's what he had to do. And so here you have so the lead homicide detective knew the family well, and so did the other guy that was the forensic photographer. And the lead homicide detective decided to make his partner the lead person, so he could just be in a supporting role because he was close to it. He wanted to be involved, but he says it just wasn't appropriate for him to take the lead, so he gave it to his partner. And so then after that, I wasn't involved in the investigation. I just heard, so I didn't really know what was going on, and but when they located the husband and he was back in the area, I remember him that night at the house taking the police sergeant or whatever he was, the forensic photographer. I remember him taking him by the lapels of his coat, looking right at this. "You have to catch the man who did this to my wife." And I'll never forget that image. And there was another word that he threw in there, but I'm not going to. But anyway, it was like, everybody was grieving, and we're all in shock, and nobody. Anyway, it was crazy. So then, with the husband, I met with him every day after that, 2 or 3 times. I mean, when your wife gets murdered, I figured that was the best place for me to be, and so. That, and then it was amazing when you. So, this detective, who was a good friend of mine, Friday, he came to the church office and he sat in my office, and he just asked me one question. And his question was, "How much do you want to know about the investigation?"
It's an interesting question.
That's what I thought. And again, I think this had to come from the Holy Spirit. My response was, in time, I want to know it all. But I'm going to trust you to decide what I need to know and when I need to know it. What I didn't know is he was trying to decide what to tell me or what not to tell me. And with that response, he decided to wait. He didn't tell me anything. He just gave me one hint. He said, "When the truth comes out, you may be surprised."
Wow.
I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what to do with it. And so I just decided to wait, and he would tell me what I needed to know when I needed to know it. In hindsight, looking back, I'm going, I am so glad the Spirit prompted me to say that, because on Sunday afternoon, I had to do the funeral service for this woman. And Sunday morning I had to announce it to the congregation, and that was hard. And then Sunday afternoon, and man, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. The sanctuary was packed. The overflow was packed. It was just, there were people everywhere. And it was the first and only funeral that I've ever done where there were 6 homicide detectives actively looking, walking, watching everybody who came to the funeral service.
Wow.
That was surreal.
Again, things that you see in movies and TV
Yeah,
shows.
like here it is in real life,
Right.
And but all I focused on was honoring this amazing woman of God with amazing faith. Just was a precious saint of God. And I wanted to do everything I possibly could as her pastor and as her friend to honor her memory and to let everybody know what a devoted follower of Jesus Christ she was. And I knew that I knew that I knew where she was.
Yeah.
And she was in heaven, she was with Jesus, and her pain and suffering was over. And life would be better, but she got robbed of the time with her children, with her husband, with her friends, with everything. It just didn't make sense. And but it was a powerful funeral service, and if I remember right, I made a pretty clear invitation. If we just don't know, life is fragile, and sometimes it ends very unexpectedly, very quickly. You don't have time to quick say a salvation prayer on your deathbed and a thing like that. That has to happen before.
Right.
So if any of you are uncertain, and I know everybody's grieving, I'm grieving, this may seem inappropriate, but I know this woman would have wanted you to receive an invitation to accept Jesus as your Savior and Lord today. And so I'm going to give you that opportunity right now. And I believe that was the right thing to do.
So where did it go from there?
Where it went from there was more days of leaving the house about 6 a.m. and being gone until about midnight. That was every day since I got that first phone call. That's what I was doing. Because the church, the community, everybody was just devastated. And this news was everywhere. And everybody was like, didn't know what to do, and confused and shocked. And that I had, just devastated. So I remember one long conversation with a friend of the victim, and she was trying to convince me that it was the husband who did it. And I talked to her at least for an hour, trying to say, yeah, but you just don't know him. There's no way. There's just no way. You just don't. And she kept pressing, and I kept defending and dodging and all this going on. And also, I'm meeting with him 2-3 times every day just to make sure he's okay and make sure the kids are okay and all this kind of stuff. And so the following Wednesday night, so it's a full week and a day later, I got a call from my friend, the detective, and he said, I'd like you to meet me at such and such a diner at 6 o'clock, I think it was. And so I thought we were going to have dinner together, and he was going to tell me some stuff. And I pulled into the parking lot at the diner, and I see this car flash its lights. And that was him signaling me to come and get into the car.
Oh.
Which surprised me. And then the surprises got worse, because what he told me then was that the husband had confessed to murdering his wife. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I had to believe it, but blindsided again. I just did not see that coming. I didn't, even though I had people trying to convince me that he did, I was so convinced that he didn't that I just couldn't get it. And yeah, that was a really big shock.
I mean, this man that you met with, that you obviously knew prior to this.
Oh yeah, I knew him very well.
Would you have considered him a friend?
Close friend. Somebody that I admired, respected, trusted, looked up to, went to for advice and counsel, both in my own life and in the church. Yeah. If you were going to talk about a pillar of the church, sometimes people will describe it like that.
Right.
This person would have been in that role, and the wife. They both were just amazing people, and I did not see it coming. I didn't suspect him for a second. I guess what I learned in that is I might be a halfway decent pastor, but I would be a horrible detective. I would just be like, oh my goodness, no, I guess I'm too trusting and I don't see the clues. And other people would say, well, yeah, that's what you expect first, but I didn't. And if I hadn't been in such a close, long time personal relationship, maybe I would have. But when you think you really, really know somebody, I just couldn't entertain the possibility that it was him.
Did you feel betrayed by that?
I felt used because, like he had me go to view her body in the casket to see if the wound was repairable enough that it was okay for an open casket or a closed casket. So I went and had to help make that decision, other things like that. So, betrayed, manipulated, lied to. That was all part of it. Played. But I suppose if you're in that role that you've done it, you're not going to just tell me that you did it. So, I mean, I get that side of it too. He kind of painted himself into a corner and didn't have the liberty to tell me that. And I'm glad he didn't, because then I wouldn't know what to do with it. And then oh man, what do I do with that? I'd have to tell the police, and then I'm the one that told. So actually, God was involved in all that from my perspective, orchestrating all the details. But again, after he told me in his car, guess where we went?
To see him?
No. We went to my other friend's house that were providing a place to stay for the kids. And when I walked through the door, the wife of that couple, when I told her, she just collapsed in a pile on the floor. And then I had to go into that little apartment and tell both of their children that their dad had murdered their mom.
Can't imagine.
No. I hope and pray nobody else ever has to do that.
Yeah. So how did the church react to this? I mean, was he involved in the church?
Very. So there were a number of reactions. For some people, it was so challenging to their faith, they couldn't worship there anymore.
Wow.
They didn't abandon God. They didn't abandon the church. They just couldn't be in that church anymore.
Right.
And then on the flip side, there were people who the Sunday I announced her murder was their first Sunday. And they stayed.
Wow.
And other people had just been there a week or two and they stayed. And everything in between. I received really no criticism for how I handled it that I can remember. It doesn't mean everybody thought it was perfect, but I don't remember anybody actually coming up to me and said, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And the other thing. Because basically, I just told people the truth. This is what happened. And then I had to tell myself, and so what I was telling myself, I shared with the congregation. This is just a powerful, vivid reminder of the truth. Don't put your faith in any human being. Don't put your faith in a leader of the church. Don't put your faith in the pastor. Your faith is only in Jesus Christ. And bad stuff happens even in church.
Right.
And so I think that really, the fact that the church is still there is a testimony to God's faithfulness.
Yeah.
Working through this horrendous thing that could have easily destroyed the church completely. These were not once in a while attenders. These were not fringe. If you were to look at the core or the pillars or whatever, they were right at the core. And that just added to the pain, the confusion, the disbelief, the anger. Some people were really angry. And then it was just all convoluted. I would say probably the only people who would really have issue with me would be the two children. A couple statements that I made, like I think I said something in the pulpit that I felt used, they were offended by that.
Sure.
And then when I didn't go to their dad's defense and I didn't attend the hearings, I don't think they liked that. And I think they were pretty angry with me. They didn't really tell me, but I heard it from a couple other people. They were pretty disappointed in me because they lost their mom. The dad was all they had left. So they're going to want him to get mercy and grace so they don't lose both parents.
Sure.
And I get that. One of my associate pastors and his wife spent a lot of time with him, so I knew they were being cared for. But because I was the bearer of the bad news twice, and then in a position to still keep doing this, and I know they felt I was siding with the police, and they wanted the other side. I get that. I understand that. My heart still breaks for them, and I hope someday they'll forgive me for doing the best I could in a tough situation. So,
what a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
I feel like you said, the church is not immune from this. You know,
It's
it
not.
happens.
It's
Hopefully never, but we know that it does. And I appreciate you sharing this story so that anybody listening, any other pastors, any other leaders, just know that somebody out there has gone through this, you know, and they could reach out to you if they needed to. So thank you so much for
You're welcome.
sharing that.
And if I might just share one last detail.
Mm-hmm.
The Sunday where I made the announcement all this had happened, the next day was Christmas Eve.
Wow.
And we had 4 Christmas Eve services planned. And I had a message title planned in advance that I had 0 time to work on. And I'm thinking, why did I pick that title? The 5 Joys of Christmas. And when I sat down to try to prepare that message, I couldn't think of a single one. I don't remember what I said in that message. I probably have some notes somewhere that I used. But I think I just talked about the fact that the only true joy at Christmas is Jesus. People are going to fail you. People are going to let you down. People are going to do horrendous things. Jesus is the only one we can totally rely on. And we do have something to celebrate. And he is the one who brought joy to the world.
Absolutely. Amen. Thank you again for sharing.
You're welcome. Wow. Thank you for watching this episode of Kingdom Real. I'm John Smith. I look forward to seeing you next time.